Welcome, everyone, to the Empath X community call. I'm Jeremy, glad to be here for another July iteration of our gathering of Community Without Conditions, where we invite you to bring what's uniquely yours. I am always excited to share that if you'd like, you can go over to empathx.org. You can find all of our archives there, our schedule. You can find a place to make a contribution, join a Facebook group. All that sort of stuff is there. And as always, we are leading off with a facilitation of about 10 minutes this week by our wonderful incumbent, Brian. So, our Brian, please take the
All
reins.
right, how you doing? So, uh, tonight we're talking about anger and managing your anger.
Mm,
I grew up in a family where anger was uh, pretty well ingrained. In fact, I can remember when I had my very first counseling session with my parents. The therapist I was working with at the time invited my parents because he knew they were coming in, and he says, "Oh, this will be a great opportunity to meet your parents, find out a little bit about you and where you came from and family history and all that." And he asked me a question, and I proceeded to answer it. And it was a question about my relationship with my parents and my upbringing and all that kind of thing. And he looked over at my dad, whose name was Julian. He said, "So, Julian, how do you feel about that?" And my dad instantly responded, "I don't have any feelings." And he said, "Well, you seem to have anger down pretty well." And that was, anger was the emotion that most of my family mastered.
mm,
So it was something I came to know very well. And because it was something I came to know so very well as simply a part of living, I don't think I got anywhere near as good a foundation built around all of the other emotions as I did anger.
mm.
Um, so it took me a while to begin to realize that anger is part of a whole spectrum of emotions. The cool thing is that I finally realized the coolest thing about all of it is anger is exactly that. It is one of a myriad of emotions that we have. It's part of the full spectrum of expression that human beings have. And people label it like it's some kind of bad thing because, you know, if we get angry, that means we've like lost our composure or whatever. But over time, I've found that anger, because it's just one of a myriad of emotions, is not really good or bad. It just kind of simply is. But the key is who's in charge.
Mm.
And if I am a reaction that contains anger, I am not in charge. The anger and the reaction and whatever that button that just got pushed, out pops anger. Button gets pushed, out pops anger. It took me a long time to realize that no one pushes my buttons. I used to accuse X number two. I got a couple of X's, a couple of sons and a couple of X's, and I accused X number two of pushing my buttons. And after a while, I realized, my buttons are based on my wounds and my life experiences and how I've processed all of those life experiences. So really, she was just over there being who she was. I was pushing my own buttons. And once I was able to take responsibility, like to be able to respond instead of react, it was a lot easier for me to be with that emotion that I really did not like growing up because my dad used it to dominate people. And my dad was a really good man. I mean, he did a ton of good in the world. He was a member of all these different organizations and a member of leadership in all of these different organizations. This is an amazing guy. But it was the anger that really was the emotion that he mastered. And what I wanted to cover tonight was anger is, for me anyway, a reaction emotion. And what I've found over time is that anger is like this surface emotion, but underneath the anger, every time, I don't care who it is, what the situation is, the anger is the reaction on top, but underneath the anger is usually some version of sadness or disappointment.
Mhm.
And below the sadness and the disappointment is caring.
Mhm.
And underneath the caring is love. So the key is to remember that in the middle of being angry and having stuff fly out of my mouth and my blood pressure go up and all of that. And remember, okay, if anger is present, what's underneath that? What's the thing I'm disappointed about? What's the thing I'm sad about? What's the thing I care about? And what's the thing I'm loving about? Because it always hurts exactly as much as we care. And I'm not saying don't care. I'm saying notice that if you're pissed off, then there's some need not getting met, or some preference not getting met, or some expectation that's going unfulfilled. And until we're aware of that as a concept, we can notice the anger, but we don't have the anger at that point. The anger has us.
Mhm.
And what I've learned is it's okay to have any emotion. You can have any emotion you want as long as it doesn't have you.
Mhm.
And as soon as you realize, after being the habitual noticer of one's reality, the more I notice my thoughts, my bodily sensations, my life circumstances, the more habituated the noticing behavior becomes, the more present I can be to what's underneath the anger. And the more readily apparent that becomes, the more I have the emotion and it doesn't necessarily have me. Now, Karen can vouch for the fact that emotions still have me, even though I've written this book called Access the Real You, which is all about noticing all of that. And, I can give the presentation tonight on it. That doesn't mean I'm not still occasionally a reaction. But to be able to love myself anyway, forgive myself anyway, love and forgive the people about my reaction that that did what they did and were being who they were being that resulted in my reacting. We're all doing the best we can. And even though it may not look like some people are doing the best they can, which pisses me off, it's okay. Like I had a conversation with a guy yesterday. He's one of my guidance clients. I can't call it counseling because I'm not a licensed counselor, but I do what amounts to sort of counseling work around the real you principles from my book and the whole philosophy around that. And it was a challenging situation yesterday because he had not gotten to that place where he was aware of his being a reaction and he was laying his upset on somebody else and they were just doing what they were doing. And I said, look, you got to love everybody. He said, but I can't love everybody. It's like, yeah, you can, especially the people you don't like. And he did not understand the concept of being able to love someone that you didn't like. Well, how can I love somebody I don't even like them? And, in this case, I'm kind of a liberal kind of guy. So, I mentioned, the current leader of our country is someone I don't like even a little. But when I can love him, I can sense his family history and where he came from and what his upbringing was and his history that resulted in him being how he is now. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's mastered having his anger and his feelings. They still have him, near as I can tell.
Hmm.
But that's a judgment too.
Yeah.
So when we can realize, like to make real for ourselves, that all of these emotions that we have sometimes have us, and sometimes we have them, and there's some love and forgiveness and self-love and self-forgiveness involved in all of it, no matter what, then we can begin to cut more people more slack, and the anger shows up less often. And the more habituated my noticing becomes, the more the anger, when it does show up as a reaction, is able to be caught, sometimes a little late, but I can catch it more readily now. And at least in my case, that's like transformational difference between then and now. So if you're not there yet, those who are watching this video maybe for the first time, if you're not there yet, it's okay. Self-love and self-forgiveness is where it really starts, which is why this guy Jesus 2,000 years ago said the most important thing is to love God with all you got. And he said the second part, which is the same as the first part, the second part is love your neighbor as you love yourself, which means you got to love yourself before you can love your neighbor. And most people don't do that very well. So until we can all more readily love ourselves and forgive ourselves, it's going to be a lot tougher to love and forgive others.
Hmm.
But it really does start in here. Doesn't start here. It starts in here. That's it. That's what I got tonight.